And welcome to the District 3, District 4 Town Hall meeting. My name is Renee Perkins-Johnson. I'm the District 4 representative, and we'll go around the room and give introductions. And I just want to thank everyone for being here. We'll start with Council Member Watlington.
Good evening. I am Victoria Watlington, Council Member and representing District 3. And I thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for inviting me to join you for the town hall tonight to talk about a very important subject, the Comprehensive 2040 Plan Next Steps. We said at the beginning of the year that the process did not end with the vote. And so it is ongoing. And in order for it to be successful, we need each and every one of the members of the community to engage. So thank you for everyone who has logged on and joined us virtually tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Taiwo, Jaiyeoba, the Planning Director and Assistant City Manager. I appreciate the opportunity to join our two council members at this town hall tonight. We're supported by a wonderful planning team virtually from both the policy mapping and the Unified Development Ordinance teams. You get to meet them during the presentations. Thank you.
And Donata? No, okay, all right. Who's online? If you can, we can start with introductions, please. Looks like Dr. Byers. Well, we can start with you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Byers. I'm the Comp Plan Implementation Manager.
Catherine Mahoney, Senior Project Manager for the 2040 Policy Map Project.
Kathy Cornett, Charlotte Planning.
Mariah Wozniak, a planner on the UDO team.
I'm Alan Goodwin. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for the UDO.
Thank you all for the introductions. And again, thank you for being here. As stated, this is the 2040, the next steps for the comprehensive plan. We wanted to make sure that we really engage the public to give you an update on the status of the comprehensive plan, the status of the UDO, and what's next. But most importantly, how you can get involved and give your input on the future of the city. So according to the agenda, we will start with the Assistant Manager, Taiwo Jaiyeoba, right? And the staff. We are being streamed via Facebook and also YouTube, so be sure to informed and involved in the future of the city. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Ty.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Johnson. If it's okay with you, we can ask people to hold off questions to the end. People can put questions in the chat box, and we're monitoring those, so I'll be able to respond to them. At least implement that. So this particular slide is very important because you see three key initiatives there that are so critical to what's next, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. So the policy map adopted on June 21st that are place-based, where people live, where they work, where they play. All those place-based policies, we're translating them into maps. Right now, today, we have what we call a future land use map. That's what we use every time a rezoning process goes through. We amend that future land use map. The 2040 policy map will use map, and that's why it's important for us to get involved in the process. This map will not necessarily change the policies that Council has adopted. It will just align itself with that. However, the relevance of this particular process is to make sure that before we have a draft map in place sometime in October, we get to have your input in the process. So Catherine, again, will walk us through that. The other initiative is the strategic mobility plan. We will not spend much time on that today. This has been developed by our colleagues, CDOT, Charlotte Department of Transportation. It really talks about connecting people and places, whether through sidewalks or through roadways or, however, bikeways, however we choose to live within the city and to walk within the city. You will know that in the plan, I believe goal number 5 is to have equitable mobility. And this strategic mobility plan feeds off of that. So that's going on right now concurrently through some listening sessions that CDOT, Department of Transportation, is having. But it has a huge relevance to the policy map itself because it's not just about where people live, but how do they connect from home to work to recreational areas. And then the third one is the Unified Development Ordinance, which is really a consolidation of our regulations and ordinances, about 8 or so of them. All of these 3 tools are very important to unpacking the vision for our growth. And Catherine will speak to the policy map. Mariah and Alan will speak to the Unified Development Ordinance. Let's go to the next slide before I turn it over to Catherine. This slide is really the schedule that we're looking at right now for all of this. If you recall, for those who have been following this story, in June, we did indicate to Council that the comprehensive plan itself, the policy piece, is what was being adopted. So you see that note there that plan policy was adopted in June 2021. But that we were going to come back with the implementation strategy and the manuals and metrics in February. Well, part of the decision that we're looking for Council to make at that time will include the adoption of the policy map that we're working through right now. Until we do that, the comprehensive plan itself is not complete. And so because the policy map is a companion document to the comprehensive plan policy that was adopted by Council. So that's what we're proposing, that we'll be able to get that in front of Council again in February of 2022. And subsequently, the strategic mobility plan, which Council will be hearing about in a few weeks, will be adopted, again, because some of those streets initiatives are so linked to the policy plan, but they're also linked to the UDO. So you could see a delay in the UDO. Let me explain that a little bit. Initially, we had indicated to Council that shortly after the policy map is adopted, that the UDO itself will be adopted maybe 2 months or so later. But the lessons that we learned from the comprehensive plan is that a draft of a document like this is not enough. And so we want to make sure that we build the opportunity into the UDO to have multiple drafts for reviews. But secondly, you also notice that between this first draft and the second draft, we're going to have an economic analysis performed on regulations that are in the UDO. That gives developers, residents, business owners, council, committees, planning commissions, Ordinance Advisory Committee to have enough time to review the document that will be released in October and then go through the economic analysis before a second draft is released shortly after Council's adoption of the policy map in February. But that would not be the only draft. After that draft is released, we've provided another 3-month period where the community is able to provide their views on the second draft of the Unified Development Ordinance, and then that will go to public hearing. So what you will notice here is that there will be roughly 4 drafts of the Unified Development Ordinance, resulting in the final adoption draft, which Council, we are hopeful, at least proposing, should adopt in July of next year. So if there's one slide that you want to hang in your office or your library, this is one of those. Now you notice that we call it draft schedule, while we know that this is really what we believe is the best way for us to be able to meet some deadline for July 1st for the comprehensive plan. We still believe that, Council will need to weigh in on this, and if one of these doesn't really fit into how it should go, they will ask us to take another look at it, at that schedule. But we believe that this schedule works best for this 3-pronged approach. So, Catherine, I will hand off to you at this point to walk us through the remaining few slides on the policy map. And sorry if I took a little bit of time. Thank you. Okay.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I would like to ask a question that I know is on the hearts and minds of many watching. What I don't see here, and if you could please explain a little bit more about 2 or 3 other related items, the Anti-Displacement Commission, as well as the Infrastructure Commission, as well as volumes 2 and 3 of the comp plan, because we adopted volume 1.
So there are 3 questions in one, maybe 2. Okay, so I'll start with the second one first. So what we called volumes 1 and 2 and 3 are really, we stopped referring to them as volumes because these are one plan, even though they may be in different documents. So what was referred to as volume 1 is your plan policy that was adopted in June. Your volume 2 is what we refer to as implementation strategy. And then your volume 3 is your manuals and metrics. And in some of those volumes are where you have the toolkit for the community area plans. They're also where you have the extensive explanation and description of the different place types. So we're bringing those to Council, those implementation strategy and manuals and metrics, which we used to call volumes 2 and 3, will come along with the policy map for you to Council in February. So that's a very good question. So thank you for seeking clarification on that. The first question. So there were 3 organizations or groups that came out of the comprehensive plan. One was the Anti-Displacement, which we call NEST, Neighborhood Stabilization Commission, which is really to come up with anti-displacement strategies that will help to mitigate impact or unintended consequences of some policies in the plan. That commission, upon appointment and adoption approval by Council, will have a 3-year term. I believe it will be made up of 15 members who will develop strategies around anti-displacement over the next several months and years for us. It is our intention, our hope, that at some point before we come in February to Council, they will have made some, findings, hopefully, that we can roll into our implementation strategy. But I will not necessarily promise that. But the good thing about that is that even though it's about 3-year term, we will be coming back to Council every year for the comprehensive plan. And so there may be some findings that they are making during their 3-year period that we'll be bringing before Council. Again, think about this as a living document. Council reserves the right to bring this plan before them, again, to include some other information that we might have left out. The second commission is the Equitable Infrastructure Commission, the Equitable Development Commission, which is supposed to talk about how we can have infrastructure done in our city in an equitable manner. Where are those places that are lacking? Why are they lacking? What do we need to do in order to make sure that infrastructure like sidewalks or even better configured roadways are in appropriate places where we're experiencing a lot of growth or where we're projected to have a lot of growth in the future? That commission is also going to be meeting once Council makes the appointment. It's a 9-member commission. I believe they're meeting for 3 years. It's a 3-year term as well. It is likely that once they start meeting, these two commissions will come up with some findings that will impact what we bring it forward in February. We do not know yet. The last group, or the third group that the plan talked about, was the Community Benefits Coalition. However, that is not one that council is forming. That was something that was community driven. It came out of the community itself. But there are references to community benefits agreement in the comprehensive plan, and we're working on that right now. Our hope and our goal is that by the time we get to council in February, there will be some conversations or some findings or recommendations coming out of, the community benefits discussion or strategy or toolkit that we call it, that can have some impact on that implementation strategy of volume 2 of the comprehensive plan. But when we get to the public hearing in January, or we have the second draft of the policy map, those are the types of conversation we'll be having. Hopefully those commissions are meeting by then at that time. But work is going on the community benefits toolkit. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Watlington? Okay, so I would piggyback off that question and just get a little more detail. Do we know when we will be voting on the committees or the commissions? I've heard from a couple residents who've submitted their applications, some great people. And just from an assistant city manager perspective, I want to ask you the next steps in that application process. Do you have any data for the number of applications? Or?
I don't. I could seek that while we're during this meeting and come back to that by the end of it. Yeah.
Okay. Just the time frame for that, please. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Catherine, over to you.
Thank you. As Ty mentioned, the objective for me this evening is to provide an overview on the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map, and then also spend the majority of our time demonstrating how to complete the phase 1 survey, which is a very meaningful opportunity to provide input on this initiative. So to cover the first part, the project overview, including what the map is, how we'll be doing the work, and how the community will be engaged, I'm going to ask Wendy to play a 5-minute video for us. Thank you.
Thank you to the 500,000 plus residents who participated in the development of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The plan was adopted by Charlotte City Council on June 21st, 2021. The first step to putting the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan into action is to translate the policies passed in the plan into a map, the Charlotte Future 2040 Policy Map. This map is a companion to the comprehensive plan. It is a translation of the plan's place-based policies into a map. The Charlotte Future 2040 Policy Map is important because it will be used in multiple decision-making processes. For example, the Charlotte Future 2040 Policy Map will directly inform the Unified Development Ordinance mapping, which is scheduled to begin after adoption of the UDO. The Charlotte Future 2040 Policy Map will also inform transportation initiatives, such as the Charlotte Streets Map, which provides the long-term vision for our road network, and the Strategic Mobility Plan, which will prioritize the city's transportation investments over the next 10 years. The Charlotte Future 2040 Policy Map will be developed using a new tool called Place Types and follow a 3-step process. Place types are a new classification system to organize patterns of development. They're more holistic and comprehensive than the city's current classification system called Future Land Use. Future Land Use only provides guidance for the type of development permitted on the property. It may also provide guidance for the level of density that's appropriate. Place types, on the other hand, provide guidance for the type, mix, and proportions of land use that are appropriate. Place types also provide guidance for building form and design, mobility choices, and open space. 10 place types were adopted as a part of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. These place types are categorized into the places we live, work, and play. Using the place type tool, the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan will include 3 primary steps. Step 1 is to map existing place types. This step will translate existing development into place types and help illustrate how the new tool is intended to be applied. Step 2 is to map status quo place types. This step will translate adopted area plans into place types and illustrate what our community would look like if we don't update the policy map with the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan recommendations. Step 3 is to map the Charlotte Future place types. This step will build off community input from past planning efforts by revising the status quo map. Place types on the status quo map will be revised to reflect the goals of the comprehensive plan, such as providing better access to housing, jobs, and daily goods. The Charlotte Future 2040 policy map process began in the spring of 2021 as staff started to think about and test the mapping approach. The mapping process will include 3 phases of engagement, beginning in late July and concluding in mid-December. City Council will be requested to review and adopt the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map in early 2022. This video is a part of the Phase 1 online engagement package for the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map. If you have questions about the purpose of the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map after watching this video, please email cltfuture2040@charlottenc.gov. You're also invited to complete the Phase 1 survey available in the online engagement package. The input shared through the Phase 1 survey will help inform the draft Charlotte Future 2040 policy map, which will be introduced to the community in October, and later revised and presented by the end of the year. Thank you for your time with this video and your continued engagement in the Charlotte Future 2040
So that video provided a little bit of context about the purpose of this effort. And it mentioned that this is really the first step to implementing the plan. The Charlotte Future 2040 plan, as Ty stated, was always intended to have a mapping component. However, we realized during plan development that due to the size of our city and the complexity of our built environment, we needed to separate out policy development from mapping. So now that we have an adopted plan and we've agreed on the direction for our future, it's time to translate those place-based policies within the plan to a map. The Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan has a lot of policies in it, and not all of them are going to be translated through this effort. This effort's really going to focus on place-based policies, which are those policies that provide direction for where and how future development should occur. There are a few examples here on the screen. One recommendation from the plan is to increase middle density housing along our major thoroughfares and near high capacity transit. So through this effort, we're going to identify locations along our thoroughfares and near our transit where we could map neighborhood 2, community activity center, or regional activity center, all of which are place types that provide that middle density housing that's called for. In another example, the plan calls for us to increase the number of jobs in areas that have low access to employment. So through this effort, we're going to identify those areas with low access to employment and then identify where it would be appropriate to map one or several of our workplace types. Those are shown here: campus, light industrial mixed use, and the larger activity centers. Again, these are the places that provide future job opportunities, and so we want to map them in areas with low access. I'm going to skip this slide for the sake of time because it was shared in the video. The engagement for this project is going to include 3 phases. We're currently in the first phase, where we are focused on educating the community about this mapping effort and asking the community about the place types, the place types that are most and least desirable around where they live, work, and play. I'll talk a little bit more about that input in a moment, but it will absolutely be used to inform the first draft of our policy map. The first draft is due in our second phase of engagement, which is scheduled to begin in October. During this phase of engagement, we're going to talk to the community about how the draft map was developed, and then talk about how it compares to the status quo map. That's the second step in our process that translates our adopted area plans. And we want to see how the 2040 policies will help set us in a new direction. We'll ask the community for input about the methodology. Maybe there's something we missed. And then also any areas of concern on the draft map. The community's input from phase 2 will be used to revise the 2040 policy map. We're hoping to have a revised map by the end of the year. And at that time, we'll talk about how input was incorporated into the map, and then start to talk about projects and programs that are needed in the future to support this mapping effort. Throughout all 3 phases of engagement, we're trying to reach our neighborhoods, the development community, the Latino community, and our younger residents. And we're doing that using a range of engagement tools. You can see a few of them listed here at the bottom of the screen. We have various meeting types that we're using, different online tools and different media outlets that we'll use throughout the duration of this project to engage the community. So I mentioned phase 1 is asking which place types are most and least desirable where we live, work, and play. The reason why we're asking this question is because we can map different combinations or different patterns of place types to achieve the plan's goals. So in the example that we looked at earlier, in order to improve or support job growth, we could map 1 of 4 place types. And so we want to know which place type would be most preferable in your area of interest. I'll mention that we're asking for this input through a survey, and tonight we'll look at the online survey. We're also going to have hard copies of this survey at all the branch locations, the library branches, by the end of this week. So you can look for it there as well. So that's a little context about the survey, and I'll mention that if you are interested in, if you participate, you'll be entered into our raffle and have an opportunity to win either a tablet or a $50 gift card. And so with that, I'd like to spend the rest of our time demonstrating how to complete the survey. You can access it either through the QR code here on the screen, or you can visit cltfuture2040.com and click on the yellow button in the middle at the top of the screen. So I'm going to start sharing my web browser, and we can walk through an example together. Is everyone seeing this landing page?
Yes.
Thank you. So when you visit the link, you'll be taken to this landing page, and you have 2 options for navigating forward. You can either follow the buttons below the introductory text, or you can click on the icons on the right-hand side of the page. I'm going to select the first, or the Get Started button, and it's going to take me to the first page that provides a little bit of context about this implementation step. If after reading this, you want to go directly to the survey, you can select the link here. Or if you'd like some more information, click Next. And the second page is going to talk about the place type tool we'll be using, as well as the 3 steps for map development. You simply scroll through the page to read through the content. There are some additional links throughout if you want more information. And then again at the bottom, if you want to now move to the survey, you have that choice by clicking on the link, or you can advance to some more information. This is the third and final informative tab. It just provides a few more key details that are helpful to know before completing the survey. And then when you click the link, it's going to open the survey in a new tab. What you'll see are 4 itemized lines, and next to each line, there's a drop-down arrow. You click on the arrow to reveal the respective questions. So for this first item, these are questions asking for demographic information. This section is optional. Again, if you want to participate or be entered into the raffle, you'll need to submit your email address here. And then we have 3 demographic questions asking about age, race, and ethnicity. And these questions will help ensure that we're reaching all segments of our population. After that, you have an option to participate in either one or all 3 of these surveys. Each survey asks you the same series of questions. You're just answering from a different perspective of whether you live there, you work there, or you play there. Let's look at the live example. You have an option to translate the survey into Spanish. And then you begin the survey by entering your zip code. This question helps ensure that we're receiving participation from all parts of the city. Below that field, there is a legend identifying the colors that you'll see on the map. There's also a link for more information about these place types. And then below that is our online or our interactive map. You can use the plus and minus buttons to zoom in and out. You can select this broken square to enlarge the map. And you begin by entering in an address. The map will zoom to that area that you've entered. And you can pan around and see this is how the existing development has been translated into place types. So in this example, a large portion of the area is classified as neighborhood 1. There is some orange, which means there's some existing neighborhood 2. And then there's some red or some existing commercial. The first question simply asks you which place type you live in. And so you reference the map, and this home is in a neighborhood 1 area because it's in the yellow area. Scroll down to the second question. The second question will refer you back up to the top of the page to look at the legend in the map, but it's asking you which place types you are most desirable around where you live and are not already there. So in this example, if I scroll back up, based on my experience, I know I would like to live around a neighborhood center. It's a smaller mixed-use area that provides different amenities such as goods and services. I know that there's not pink within this current map view. And so I'm going to scroll back down to question 2 and select the Neighborhood Activity Center option. You can select one or multiple place types for this question. For tonight's demonstration, I'm just going to select one. And then you move on to the third question. Again, it's going to refer you back up to the top. This time it's asking which place types are least desirable to live near. The difference here, it doesn't matter if these place types already exist or don't exist around your home. We just want to know in general what you consider undesirable. So I'll reference the legend, and I personally would rather not live around auto-oriented commercial or manufacturing. So I will scroll back, and you can see here on the map there is commercial, but despite that being around the home, I can elect that that's an undesirable place.
Hey, Catherine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you show where a resident could look at the definition of the types of neighborhoods in one and manufacturing, just to give a little more detail or information for folks who might not be familiar with the terms?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So this link is exactly as what you described, and it's located under each section of the survey. So unfortunately, it takes you to a different tab. That's kind of a limitation of the software we're using. I'm going to let that pull up. Go back to this. So this is what you'll be taken to. It's a PDF that provides a visual example of each place type, as well as the description of that place. And so the same link is provided under the legend and under each question. 1, 2, and 3.
It's good.
So it's a 3-question survey. You will be, at this point, you can now elect to complete the same 3 questions from the perspective of where you work or play. You would do that by dropping or clicking on the right arrow and dropping down the relevant questions, or you could simply submit the answers that you've already submitted. So that's an overview of how you complete this online survey. And again, as I mentioned, we will have some hard copies available in the libraries by the end of the week if you're not comfortable with this online platform. Or if it's something that you would like us to help facilitate at a community meeting, we would be happy to come out and walk residents through this in person as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And just I have one more slide to talk about. In terms of when this map is adopted, our next steps would be there'd be a 3-month delay before the map is effective. We need that time to update some internal processes. And then once the map's adopted, the future land use tool will be retired, and the future land use map will be replaced by the 2040 policy map, as Ty stated at the beginning. The land use maps within our area plans would be updated. And then Mariah and Alan are going to also talk about the UDO adoption, which is another important next step. That's all I have to share for this evening. I believe we're holding questions till the end of both presentations, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Mariah, I'll advance.
Great, thank you, Catherine. So hi, everyone. My name is Mariah Wozniak, and I am a planner on the UDO team with the City of Charlotte, and my colleague, Alan Goodwin, is also here presenting with me for the UDO, and we are very pleased to be here with you all. So tonight we'll be providing an overview of the Unified Development Ordinance schedule and offering a fairly high-level explanation of the UDO, as well as highlighting upcoming public engagement and a few other concepts that you all, so that you all can be aware of when the upcoming draft comes out in the fall. So next slide, please. So as Taiwo mentioned, there will be 4 drafts of the UDO, all leading to a hopeful July 2022 decision. So the initial draft is planned for release in October, which kicks off the first push for community engagement between October and January of 2022. And then we will be taking comments, reviewing and considering the feedback that we receive, and then releasing a second public draft that will show red line changes in March of next year. We will then repeat that feedback loop on the second draft, again, requesting comments, making and affirming changes, continuing adjustments, and resulting then in a public hearing draft. And then we're planning for a public hearing in June of 2022 and a subsequent adoption draft based on any additional feedback. We'll also be attentive to comments made directly to council and working with council through committee and full council, making adjustments as the timeline progresses there. Next slide, please. So what is the connection between the adopted comprehensive plan and the Unified Development Ordinance? So one of the major roles of the UDO is to provide the regulations needed to implement the vision established by the adopted comprehensive plan. And so not only are we aligning the development regulations with council adopted policies, but also taking regulations from 8 different places and consolidating them into one singular development ordinance. So this includes zoning, subdivision, trees, streets and infrastructure, streets and sidewalks, post-construction stormwater, floodplain regulations, erosion control, and driveway access as pictured above. Next slide. So it is helpful context, I think, to understand who is working on the UDO at this point. So we have a core team in planning, design, and development, as well as a vast array of city and county departments providing their expertise and feedback as well. We just received a round of feedback on the zoning components from the interdepartmental staff team, and we currently have the subdivision article out for review. The Ordinance Advisory Committee, or OAC, has been an integral component in shaping the ordinance at a high level, and we will continue to engage with them even after the draft is out in the fall. And we also have a consultant team that we're working with, as well as a legal review team to make sure we're compliant, obviously from a legal standpoint. So we've had many groups involved to get the components of the UDO to where they are now, and we expect even more folks will be involved once the draft is released in early fall, especially through community engagement. So also just want to highlight that we're balancing a number of interests that we heard during the comprehensive plan process. These include sustainability, affordability, cost of development, ease of administration, as well as some of the others you see listed above in that graphic. So we are working thoughtfully to harmonize those interests as we move forward. Next slide. I think the big question on people's minds is how are we engaging people? And we will have an extensive engagement process. We are putting forth videos and information on our website to help bring the UDO content forward in a variety of formats. At this time, we are working with a consultant to create a video series where you can go in and learn about how the UDO might impact different scenarios like new neighborhood development, existing neighborhoods, as well as existing and potential businesses in the future. So this is a great avenue for community members to access the UDO in a way that's most meaningful and personal to them. And we're excited for this educational component of our engagement, and we hope that you will find this approach informative as well. So the UDO website, The UDO website will really serve as a landing page for all of our digital content. And we will also have other informational materials on our website as well. And so also to say, although we are leaning into digital resources just due to the risk and uncertainty posed by the pandemic, we are also cautiously planning for a mix of in-person and virtual meetings to engage the community and garner the most meaningful feedback possible. So we recognize that different community members and groups have varying preferences and needs when it comes to engagement, and we are making a conscious effort to be mindful of that fact while prioritizing the public health situation in the community. Next slide, please. So as a quick rundown, the UDO combines regulations from several ordinances into one place. Ultimately, the UDO will have 40 articles that fit into categories related to zoning, subdivision, streets and infrastructure, stormwater, natural resources, and administration. And this graphic really illustrates the connection between the policy map and, by springboarding into zoning just a bit. And it is a reminder that place types really lay the foundation for the subsequent zoning districts. And so each place type there has at least one zoning district, but typically more. And along with the palette of place types that Catherine spoke about, we will have a palette of new districts, and our current zoning districts will translate into those. So this particular example showcases our mixed use and non-residential place types and associated zoning districts. So you can see there are 2 for manufacturing and logistics, 1 for innovation, mixed use, so on and so forth. And we are developing those districts based on information from the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. Here you can see a breakdown of the neighborhood zoning districts. So for the neighborhood 1 place type, there will be 6 zoning districts, and for neighborhood 2, there will be 3. And you can see the comparable districts to the existing zoning for neighborhood 1. So if you are currently living in an area zoned R3, as I know many of you listening in may be, then your new zoning under the UDO may be comparable to N1A. If your zoning is currently R4, then your new zoning will be comparable to N1B, and so on. And then the neighborhood 2 zoning districts, based on the neighborhood 2 place type, are geared towards higher density residential developments, such as multifamily and townhome communities. Next slide. So this illustrates the progression from the adopted comprehensive plan to the regulations that you will see in the UDO draft, using the neighborhood 1 zoning districts as an example. So we start with the policy from the adopted comprehensive plan as the foundation, which then moves into the place type associated with that policy. And then from there, the subsequent district regulations follow. This particular example cites policy 2.1, which is a notable policy from the comp plan that seeks to allow single family, duplex, and triplex housing wherever single family housing is allowed. But there are other goal inputs from the comprehensive plan, as well as the policy mapping that Catherine spoke on, and other aspects of the development regulations that influence the standards of each zoning district and where they are located. And this is but one example of the comprehensive plan policy and place type informed zoning districts that you may expect to see in the UDO draft release this fall. Next slide. So circling back, here is the project schedule. I know it's a little bit tough to read. There's a lot of detail, but it really complements the slide that Taiwo showed in the beginning. And I see, yeah, you might not be able to see everything here in detail, but I would like to highlight the length and frequency of the public comment periods that we have planned for the UDO. So following the draft release this fall, we will embark on a public engagement push until January of the new year. As shown here, we will then be reviewing the comments that we receive on the first UDO draft and using them to inform the second draft prior to its release in March of 2022. Again, those changes will be shown in red lines so that folks can see what has changed. And then after that, we will again accept public comments and utilize those during the preparation of the public hearing draft and so on. And then at the bottom, in the middle, I guess, you can see that we will have digital resources as well as a mix of in-person, again, and virtual pop-up and public meetings in accordance with the COVID situation. This is all to say that we value public input with the UDO and have tried to develop the project schedule in a way that honors that notion, really giving ample time and opportunity for public participation. At this point, the best method of staying up to date, prior to the UDO draft release is by visiting the Charlotte UDO website. So that's charlotteudo.org to subscribe for updates, or you can subscribe directly at publicinput.com/connectudo, and I will make sure that that goes into the chat function of this meeting. That really is the best way to stay connected, as well as following some social channels. So that concludes what I have prepared for today. Catherine, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariah. Great job. Is that all we have as far as speakers?
So it's now, I don't know.
Okay.
So if you want me to start.
Well, I think Councilmember Watlington would like to ask some questions, and then we'll start with the public questions. Thank you to the city staff for the presentations. It was very valuable information. So thank you. Councilmember Watlington.
Sure, thank you. One question as a follow-up to the public input. Right now, residents can go to the request a speaker option on the city website and request any member of staff from county or city services to come out and speak at their neighborhood meeting. As neighborhood meetings are starting to go back in person, is this an option through which to get a planning or a UDO resource out to speak directly to community members?
I can take that, and then Catherine, if you want to jump in, or Kathy. Yes, the short answer is yes. But I will also caveat that by saying we have to match that with resources, because there's only so many staff persons going out. But we've been receiving that. I will say thank you to both of you, especially Councilman Johnson. You sent us a number of opportunities last night. And Councilman Watlington, you created some opportunities for us as well as this tonight. So I really want to say thank you to both of you for doing that. But in addition to what our council members are doing,
Yes, please. Yes.
So before we go to the questions coming from Facebook or YouTube, so I believe that it's closed right now. And so nominations by council will be on September 13, and September 27 will be for the appointment. The anticipation commissions, we're definitely going to be paying a lot of attention to what happens subsequent to when you have the other aspects of the plans in the next year. And then there was also, I'd like to also indicate that last Transportation Planning and Environment Committee meeting, we provided some overview of the UDO. For those who are interested, we're going to be having a special Transportation Planning and Environmental Committee meeting again. I believe it should be September 22nd, but we will send that information out to do a deeper dive of the Unified Development Ordinance presentation that we did tonight with council members. So for those who want to pay attention, that will be a good opportunity to do that as well. The first question that I see on there asks, can you give more specific examples of the types of policies that will be created or amended under the Unified Development Ordinance? Mariah, I'll take a stab at this, and then if I am inadequate, you can jump in. So the Unified Development Ordinance does not create policies. It does not necessarily amend policies. It just sets regulations that are aligned with the policies of the comprehensive plan. So the reason why the process that got us to June 21st council decision and that we're going through right now is about really walking through those policies, because they will inform the regulations that are set in the Unified Development Ordinance, which may beg another question. Why don't you wait until it's done before you start working on the Unified Development Ordinance? But that's because a lot of the work that we've been doing in the Unified Development Ordinance are not necessarily always about the zoning districts. There's so many other aspects of the Unified Development Ordinance that we've been working on through our Ordinance Advisory Committee, even before the comprehensive plan came into being, that we paused a little bit. But the work on the place types, which is really a policy, is where you actually do a lot of the creation and amending. And what the Unified Development Ordinance does is to calibrate regulations that will align with those policies. Alan, Mariah, if you want to jump in on anything I just said.
Ty, I think you did a perfect job of explaining it. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question is, how do these plans ensure that we have enough density and green space for communities to thrive? Catherine and Kathy, I think this is for you, but let me take a stab at this also. How do these plans, I believe that's the policy map, ensure that we have enough density and green space for communities to thrive? This is why this survey is so important. Let me start that way. you notice that in the survey, there are 3 questions related to places where people live, where they work, and where they play, which really covered those 3 aspects that are in this question. Density, of course, of residential, and green space in terms of where people live. So if you provide your input, it will help us to really identify areas in the community today where we've identified open spaces or green spaces for communities, but maybe there are others that you will help us to also identify. But one thing we're going to, as much as possible, do is to address inadequacies of green spaces in communities where they're not adequate at the moment. But that will be all based on your input. So Kathy and Catherine, I'll push that back to you.
Todd, to build on your point about the mapping, addressing inadequacies, the mapping effort also will take into consideration our future growth projections. And so through this methodology, we know how many jobs and housing units are needed to accommodate our future growth. And that'll be a check with our place type recommendation to make sure that the 2040 map and all the place types that it recommends provides enough opportunity for those job and housing units that are needed. Kathy, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Nope, that's perfect.
Excuse me, got a question as a follow-up to that. As I think about the survey, I know that some of the input or feedback that was given was that the questions were going to beg the same answers from across the city. Virtually no one wants to live next to industrial, right? Whereas others would like to live next to amenity centers. So assuming that we're going to see people having similar types of desires across the city, how are we going to implement these place types equitably? What's going to help determine who gets what they wanted and who may have to adjust?
The community input is one of multiple variables that are going to be used to draft the map. And so existing development patterns and existing entitlements are something that will have to be considered. And so that, we can't just start with a blank slate and erase all single family next to manufacturing, but we can recommend some changes to mitigate those impacts of single family next to manufacturing. And then in terms of the equitable point, that's where a lot of our evaluation of the access to goods and jobs, the EGF, the Equitable Growth Framework, will help inform which areas of town have different places and which areas of town don't. And so what would be an equitable distribution of the new assignments?
Thank you.
I will also add to that, Catherine, so the input is very important, definitely, and that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. But Catherine said something earlier that people might have missed when she started, and that is that the draft place type map itself will be available in October. And that will also it will be for a short window, but it will be an opportunity for people to review that. And I think that's one area to start looking at balance and equitability. And then there will be a third phase of engagement as well. So we will still have opportunity to be able to review that in terms of how equitable some of the uses are.
Okay. That was a good question. One of the things I think that I'd like to ask, Catherine mentioned, or I think it was Catherine, that there's a 3-step process. And in that 3-step process, she mentioned a status quo map, a future map, and there was it sounded like there was a current map or something. Can you go into that process just a little more, how that's going to look? Is there something now that's available that citizens can see? I guess that would be the status quo map, or can you give me a timeline on that? What does that look like?
I think, Catherine, that would be slide number 7. That's where we talked about the 3-step process. So Wendy, I don't know if you can pull that up. for Catherine to walk us through that again in terms of what that looks like. But the existing place type is the first step process, first step in the process where we translate existing development into place types today. And then we will, second step is to map status quo place types. In other words, how do we do have adopted area plans right now. If we translate them into place types, what does that look like? And then the work we're doing right now is that third step in the process in terms of how do we revise that second step of status quo into the comprehensive plan policies. Right, Catherine? I don't know if Wendy is able to pull that up.
Do you all see it displayed on your screen? I was able to navigate backwards.
Yes.
Okay.
We don't see
We don't see it in the room.
Oh.
Wendy, can you
help us out? Oh, well, I'm displaying I'm advancing Wendy's slide deck.
Yeah, I can see it on the screen on my end.
Well, that's okay. We can't see it, but my question.
Okay, we see it now.
Okay. So yes, and my question is the time frame for each of those steps. I know that the first draft is going to be issued in October. So the map of the existing place types, are we looking at the same time frame for that? Or is that something that residents can be looking for sooner than the draft is?
So existing place types, that step has been completed, and that's the map that you see in the online survey.
Okay.
There's also an online tool that explains how that map was developed. I can drop that in the chat box in just a minute. And then we are currently finishing up step number 2. And we're supposed to be done with that in 2 weeks. And that's going to feed into the model where we evaluate our infrastructure capacity and our growth projections. And that'll help inform changes that we make in step 3. So step 2 and 3 are kind of cyclical right now. And the product, we will have 2 and 3 ready in October. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you for that information. Okay. We have a question from the internet. The developers move fast to gentrify more of the city with duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. And our schools are dangerously overcrowded now. How does this work prevent this from happening?
So I can start as well on that. As the age-old question on gentrification. And this plan will not necessarily, I will be very clear that I don't believe there's any plan that will stop gentrification from happening. But this plan can minimize displacement. There are certain provisions in this plan that will help us with minimization of displacement. One of them is what we referred to earlier, which is the formation of the Neighborhood Stabilization Commission, where they will be meeting over the next 3 years and come up with different findings and strategies that will inform this plan in terms of what are the things that we implement. That's one. Secondly is that right now I believe that we have 3 pilot programs going on. One, I believe, in Hidden Valley. There are other 2 areas as well where we're talking about how do we mitigate displacement in certain communities or also minimize gentrification. There will be lessons from that will inform the work we're doing. But there's also another tool in the comprehensive plan that we refer to as Neighborhood Overlay Conservation District or Character District, which is really if a group of homeowners kind of works like you have your historic districts today. While it may not necessarily prevent development from taking place, people in a particular neighborhood could say that that's a tool they wanted to use to be able to preserve the character of their neighborhood. What the preservation of character is, it will be up to them and up to the development of the area. Will it be you're only going to keep the single family units that you have, or you will mix it with townhomes, attached single family homes? I don't know, but there are certain policies in the plan that will help to minimize displacement. So I cannot tell you that there's one plan that will stop gentrification, but we definitely look forward to the work that the two commissions will be doing that will inform the implementation of this plan over time.
Yeah. As a follow-up to that, Ty, I know that you mentioned that this particular land use piece is just one component. When will we see how the programs that you mentioned, things like home ownership, retention, and those kinds of things, when will those be rolled out? Because I think probably the fear at this point, or the hesitation in the community, is that we will roll out a land use policy and regulations without the programs that will assist in anti-displacement.
So there are some programs that are in place already that are, like the down payment assistance, for example, that's in place. And I believe that there's conversation around maybe increasing that bucket. There is the housing trust fund opportunity for us to be able to help developers as well to take advantage of that. And we've talked about what that does for us and those who continue. But there are new programs, like I mentioned, the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, which we will be rolling those out once the Unified Development Ordinance, I believe, before it's passed, actually, we will start working on criteria that will be required in order to have something like that happen. So by the time we have the Unified Development Ordinance in place, we'll have that language that will be able to help neighborhoods who want to take advantage of that. There are some other programs, I believe, that could come out of the Anti-Displacement Commission, and I don't know yet right now what those will be, but I believe that as they come out, if those findings come out early in time, there could be things that we roll into the implementation strategy of the comprehensive plan that will assure our residents that there are certain things that we're doing right now rather than just going too far ahead without some tools in place today. So I know that we mentioned like 15 or so different tools or programs that are out there, new and existing, and I can't roll all of them off my tongue right now, but they have different timelines.
Ty, if I could jump in and add to what you said about that, the Neighborhood Character Overlay District would let neighborhoods, it would be voluntary if enough property owners in a neighborhood wanted to look into that. It would allow neighborhoods to set up their own set of criteria to maintain the character of their neighborhood for things like building heights. For example, if the neighborhood was predominantly one-story houses, they could set up something that would limit the height of new infill housing. Or if neighborhoods had large front yards, they could establish a setback that may be a little different than what the ordinary zoning setback might be, but they wouldn't be able to use the neighborhood character overlay to restrict any of the uses that would be allowed in that district. So they couldn't use that to restrict, duplexes and triplexes from being built if they would be allowed in that place type and zoning district.
Do we have, and I'm sure that it's going to be online, because I've heard this discussion before. I know there would be many neighborhoods that would want to apply for the neighborhood overlay exemption. So do you know what those requirements are right now, or can we have those listed? Because we know that not all of neighborhoods are going to be granted that exemption. So
we're still working through, Councilor Johnson, thank you. We're still working through those criteria. And when we have them, we'll bring them to the TAP committee and probably even council. But I can tell you that one example to look at is how we do historic districts right now. Our historic districts require about 50% of property owners to really launch that. And it takes a while to make it happen, but it's got to be something that you have about 50%. The nearest example to Charlotte, where you have NCOD, or Neighborhood Character Overlay District, is Raleigh. And I believe that for the most part, it seems to follow the old historic district thing as well. The difference is that they have theirs in perpetuity, which could be a plus or negative depending on how you look at it. But if people have if people want to see what that looks like, I think it's been in place in Raleigh for 20 years, right? And only 12 or 7 neighborhoods have taken advantage of it in that time space. I don't recall now, but it's not been a whole lot.
Okay.
But it's been in place for quite a while there.
Yeah.
Part of the reason, as I've been having conversations with neighborhoods and also having conversations with housing and neighborhood services, is that some of those policies, like what you mentioned, require 50% of property owners. However, for many of our communities, the ones that are most vulnerable to displacement have exactly right. There is a higher level or a higher percentage of non-owner occupied dwellings. So as we think about how do we engage renters, how do we engage owner occupants in the policy, that's going to be key, because many of the neighborhoods, including mine, have tried before to get, like you said, historic designations, and were unable to simply because the property owners do not live in the neighborhood.
Another thing I would add, because you said something before we get too far, down the line, I think the time is now. And I know that Hidden Valley and some other areas are going to be a part of an anti-displacement pilot. That's exciting. But I have an example in Hidden Valley, actually, that the land sold from the original owner for $65,000, and then just this past August, an investor sold it for $240,000. The land. So we want to educate our residents now. Like that, if the owner did want to sell, or that original owner, if they had the education and the information, then they would have developed wealth for their family. So that's the fear of gentrification. It's the lack of information. No one's against higher property value, as long as we can protect residents who cannot afford it, and also give information so that people don't feel taken advantage of. So one of the things, and we've talked about this, Ty, if we could provide some education now for our residents, for our villages, right? So that residents are armed with information. So I think, because you just said it, gentrification is going to happen. The plan is passed. So the goal today is, how do we make this, a win-win, or protect our vulnerable residents. So I'd like to see some education sooner than later. How does the 2040 Center City plan fit into the city's plan?
Thank you very much for that question. So the Charlotte City Center has been working on their 2040 plan for the last 2 years, pretty much about the same time as we have been working on ours. And they're using the same consultant that's been working on ours, but that same consultant did the previous one for Center City. The way I will simplify it is that the city's comprehensive plan is more of a 25,000 foot level in some instances. And in certain instances, in order for it to be able to inform the Fire Development Ordinance adequately, it comes down to the ground to make some policies that are tangible. The Center City plan is almost like a community area plan, because the Center City is a municipal service district. University City also has a vision plan, which is going to come before council at some point in the next several weeks. But these plans are models for us as to how we see all the community plans coming out of this comprehensive plan, small geographies that can drill down into the details of what's good and better for their specific neighborhood, regardless of the overarching principle in the comprehensive plan. So that's kind of how it fits into the city's comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you. We have lots of questions. We didn't see them before, right? So now, okay. So what's the maximum number of residents that can live in a single family triplex or duplex?
Oh, that's a very broad question right there. So the triplex, by their nature, I would say there are 3-unit developments, and duplexes are 2-unit developments, and single family obviously could be a household of 4 for any one of those, right, guys? If I'm capturing very well, it definitely is not one person, but you will say a household of 4 people at the least.
I think the implication is parking.
I think that's where that question is going, yes. And so I know that, yeah, probably the implication of that is how many people can park and things like that. And we've had complaints about people living in single-family homes that are like they rent them out and they have 8 people living in there, parking on grass and all of that. So that happens in different parts of Charlotte, but those are code enforcement issues that I believe that we're working through right now, even as we speak, regardless of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, they've asked for a simple yes or no answer. Are we eliminating R3 zoning?
Yes, I'll say there is that. Any zoning that is exclusively single-family residential today, we're accommodating other products beside that. So the simple answer is yes.
Okay. What's the deadline to complete the survey?
Catherine, I believe it's October 1st or September 30th, right, to complete the survey?
Friday, October 1st.
Okay. So I'll add to this answer quickly that Catherine said it earlier, we're distributing hard copies in libraries across the city. And thank you. That was also your ideas, both of you. Thank you very much. But we are also mailing postcards to homes all across the city. So I'll say, be careful what you throw out in your junk mail in the next several days. So that you will be receiving postcards where you live. So you'll be able to either QR code or use a QR code to get you to participate in the survey, or at least know the nearest library where you can go and participate. But those should be coming out in the next week or 2.
Okay. Will there be, or can there be, a pop-up event for the people in the community to complete the survey about where they would like to live, work, or play? Some folks may need help navigating this online. This is not something someone in the community can facilitate.
Catherine, can you speak to our pop-up event? I know that's what you've been doing for the last 1 month.
Yeah, we've been attending a number of different events geographically dispersed throughout the community to reach people where they are and offer an opportunity to complete this survey. We've also, as mentioned earlier, requested an audience with neighborhoods. And so we're happy to attend a neighborhood meeting, a church group, a book club. At this point with COVID numbers, I don't foresee us holding one large community event for the survey by October 1st. So I would really encourage residents to invite us to something that they have planned.
And Catherine, if people want to request that, can you share the email address again for people? Because I see a couple questions from NAREP and also from Pastor Stewart of Mount Zion. Yeah, so if you could share your email address. The email address they should send that to.
Okay, is she going to share it? Are you going to share it on Facebook or?
I think chat box. Okay,
then if you just put it in the chat and then Donata can. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. And District 4, we are having an event, a large event this weekend, Labor Day. There's a Queen City Art Fest. Shout out to Tommy Nichols and Darlene Heater. But and I've invited the city staff to participate. Hopefully someone can attend and help folks with the survey. It is outside, so we are respecting COVID rules. So they are doing a great job in engaging the residents. We need to hear from the residents. The time is now. The time is now when you want to be involved in the development, the future development of the city, because the zoning process, as you know it, when you have the opportunity to give that input, is changing. So we need to hear from as many people as possible. And that's why Victoria and I wanted to make sure we had a town hall to get this information out to the public. Please complete the surveys and stay engaged. How can neighbors, especially in the vulnerable neighborhoods, be protected from businesses being operated out of houses as they are currently prohibited zoning in residential neighborhood zoning? Construction company, landscape, auto repairs, examples.
Good question. That's really more of a code enforcement question. And I was visiting one of the homeowners association invited me to tour their neighborhood 3 weeks ago or so, and I went to that zoning administrator, pretty much thought the entire place. And so I totally understand what you're saying in terms of people sometimes doing business out of their homes and repair business and things of that nature. So take pictures, share them with the city, and code enforcement will definitely come out, and usually it will be a warning to just let people know what they're doing wrong, not necessarily fine them, but that's really more of a code enforcement issue.
Okay, thank you. It appears that there are no controls in place when it comes to filling out the survey that ensures that those completing the surveys for an area actually do live in the area. You can put in any area code. How do you know the feedback you're getting is from the true stakeholders, residents of an area?
So Kathy or Catherine, did you hear the question? How do we know that? I have an answer, but I'll let you guys go first.
Yeah, I think it's a limitation of the product that we're using. There's not like a security check function available to us. So there's a certain amount of trust involved in this survey.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would say that's what I was going to also say, that of surveys of this kind, that's usually what happens, because again, it's a citywide plan. Now, if it's a community area plan, which we're going to get into at some point in the future, then you can specify the survey for a particular area. But I do understand where that question is coming from, is that some people living somewhere else may be completing surveys indicating that they live in another part of town. But there's a lot of, this is a lot of honor system in terms of trusting that people will say they work or live where they actually indicate that they do. Again, because it's a citywide plan, that's why if you put controls, it limits the ability for people to participate.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. We've got a couple more questions and just a couple more minutes. What is the projected timeline when we can expect a complete analysis between policy mapping under UDO together with place type mapping currently underway via the Silver Line and the TOD?
Correct me, guys, if I'm wrong. There's no specific place type mapping going on with regards to the Silver Line at TOD, but there is an equitable TOD work going on with regards to the Silver Line. And that's included in our place type mapping work, as well as, we had a transit-oriented development work done several months ago, but that will be updated as a result of the UDO. But I don't believe there's any specific place type mapping done with regards to Silver Line. It's just part of the overall place type mapping exercise.
Okay, thank you. This is the last question from the internet. Can there be a limited percentage of duplexes, triplexes, multifamily to a ratio of overall homeownership homes? I think that's a great question, and I think those of us that were really advocating for provision 2.1, yay or nay, that was a concern. Is there a limitation or any restriction on where a duplex or triplex can be built where allowed in single-family neighborhoods?
So thank you for that question. But the question also assumes that you cannot home a duplex. You can own a two-unit home. So let me clarify that quickly. However, I also understand that there's a number of places where you have duplex and triplexes, and they will be for rent. So I get that. That's why one of the things that we're doing during this place types mapping is also a fiscal impact analysis, where we're going to have market readiness as well as land suitability study that shows areas in the city over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years that are probable for this type of development. We know they may not happen everywhere. So that impact analysis will show us where they may happen. Secondly, is that even if the impact analysis comes back and says that it can be done in certain places, the policy specifies certain criteria: lot size, lot configuration, setbacks, height, all of those things will ultimately impact where you can have those types of products. So,
But the short answer is where they are allowed to be built, there's no restriction.
no, there's no
Yes, so
restriction.
the short answer is no. Okay, and then the R3, that question about is R3 being eliminated? What's it going to be replaced with?
So if you notice in the presentation of Miami, I believe that that's an N1.
Okay, that's what.
Yeah, Ty, if I can,
Okay.
if I can expound a little bit on that. Yes, the R3, it won't be a zoning district going forward in the UDO. None of our current zoning districts will carry into the UDO. All of the UDO districts will be new. But the development standards of the N1A, which is the equivalent of the R3, will be very similar to what's in R3 now in terms of the lot sizes and the setbacks and the building heights and so forth. So the N1A will look very much like the R3 district does today, even though it will have a different name and will have a few differences. It will look a lot like the R3, and the N1B will look a lot like today's R4 district, and so on.
Thank you, Alan. That's why I asked that. I thought there was some similarities. I wanted to clarify that. Also, there was one question about the schools and the school overcrowding being considered. We know that. We know that, and I don't know what to say. When I ran for office, I'm like, surely we're going to be strategic and we're going to consider these overcrowding schools, and we're not going to approve things that schools are overcrowded. And sadly, that's our reality. We see schools, and I've talked to one of the school board members. We see schools that go from 116% overcrowded to 125. We look at that every month. So we'll get there. It's a challenge of a growing city, and we thank you. We thank you for your input. We thank you for your great questions, and make sure that you're getting involved, giving your input, because the time is now. I want to thank Taiwo for attending. I want to thank our magic lady, Miss Magic, back there behind the scenes. Thank you to the city staff. I can honestly say that I've had community meetings, and I think each one of your team members has been involved, Taiwo. So thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Watlington. And most of all, thank you all. Thank you to the public for watching. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.